So welcome back for more AP Biology fun. We're going to deal with animal reproduction instead of plant reproduction. So, how do animals reproduce? It's a little bit of what they ask for, some parts from your book that you can look at. Animals are complicated, and it's not that they're more complicated than plants or less complicated than plants. It's just they're a different type of complicated. They turn out to have a variety of tissues, and they can move. That's typically some of the major descriptions of animals. But we have the ability to move at our own whim. We don't necessarily react. And that's what triggers the motion. Because there's plants that can move. It's just they're usually reacting. So when I look at animals and I look at how they reproduce, there's a few varieties that exist. One of those is they can occur without any type of sexual selection, meaning it's completely and totally random mating, kind of like pollen in the air. These would be animals that are stuck and they don't get to move as much, or at part of their lives they are stuck, typically at reproductive age, and the result is the only way they can reproduce is to let sperm and let egg out and about. One of those famous examples would be something called a sponge, which is shown on the screen. Sorry, I have a cold, so my nose is getting stuffy, and I don't want to blow my nose on the screen, but I think I'm going to have to. So that foggy stuff that you see in the picture is actually probably a combination of sperm and egg being released by that sponge so they can go out and be fertilized. The catch is sometimes that's not always the best option. So you can have some organisms like frogs and fish where they will actually, as soon as the eggs are being laid, you add sperm to them, they're fertilized. Hooray. But that doesn't necessarily hold much if we had to go on land, because on land we can't just drop a wet egg somewhere. We need to have a way to protect it from the environment. So what evolved was something referred to as the amniotic egg, which is what's shown on the screen. Anything that's alive and lives on land, for the most part, will lay amniotic eggs. At least definitely for the vertebrates. The invertebrates, they're a different story. But the vertebrates lay amniotic eggs. And what you happen to have are a whole bunch of different, what we would call membranes, which are just little dividing lines that make different types of sacs. Like you have a portion that's meant just for nutrition. We call that the yolk sac. Or we could have an area where we have gas exchange. We'll call that the chorion. Or we could have an area where we could have all of the wastes building up. And we call that the allantois. So we have all these areas inside of this egg where we can keep this egg going, where we can keep whatever's inside the embryo alive. Therefore, it can develop outside the confines of being in salt water. We brought the salt water on land, and we put a hard shell around it. If we look at us, mammals, our version of fertilization, which is internal fertilization, is a bit more complicated because we've moved where the eggs show up, and we brought them way inside, which means sperm now need to take a trip in order to get to where the eggs are. And there's a whole bunch of anatomy that goes with that. So we'll have a vagina, then we'll have a uterus, then we'll have a uterine horn or fallopian tubes. Then we'll have the ovaries where the eggs are made, but then you'll have to connect the two, which is where the fimbriae turn out to be. Fimbriae are these things down here. So we have all these connections that we need to make. All of that is so that we can guarantee a sperm running into an egg. In doing this process, what we can end up having is not needing to worry about what's going on with the young. The mother can keep the embryo with her, not just lay it out in the beach or underneath a rock or something like that and hope for the best, which means we can guarantee much better that this thing is going to survive. This embryo is going to make it because we're not leaving it up for chance. If you have external fertilization, why are there billions of sperm and billions of eggs? Let's just see what happens. If you happen to have a fertilization that's still external, so frogs or fish, you need to worry about, well, what's going to happen to those eggs there? Well, some of them will make it, some of them aren't. They're going to get eaten or die or something along those lines. If you're a reptile, you lay a whole bunch of eggs and then you run away somewhere. What's your issue? Well, you have to make sure that those stick around. If you're a bird, you lay fewer eggs and you kind of guard them a little bit more, but even then, some of them aren't going to make it. With mammals, we hold on to them on the inside, and the result is we can get a bigger brain. We actually get more development going on because the mom is keeping it safe, provided the mom doesn't die or something goes wrong genetically. The catch is it requires a whole bunch of different parts to be communicating, because communication is a big deal. We can communicate between organisms, but we can also communicate within the organism. So what we'll have to do is coordinate the release of the egg and where that egg lands, which is what we call the endometrium of the uterus. So as long as we can coordinate those, we might be able to increase the likelihood of us having a fertilized egg and thus getting an offspring. The result, unfortunately, is that picture. It's a whole bunch of complicated mess. And if you really want to know more about that, take Anatomy and Physiology. We talk about it there.